You have the key in your pocket and your wheel is chopped for safety purposes. Then we're going to start at the front, checking that the headlight is securely mounted, not broken, cracked, or damaged, and clear in color. It's clean. Turn signal securely mounted, not broken, cracked, or damaged, and it is amber or clear in color. The marker and ID lights on top of the cab, securely mounted, clean, not cracked or broken, and amber in color. And I'm going to release the hood latch on this side. I'll release the hood latch on the other side. It's nice that your examiner won't be helping you. Come to the front, call out clear. You can pull the hood open and let the water escape from the... On this side, I'm going to check what's different because you told me in the instructions to only check what's different on this side. On this side, I have a water pump, securely mounted, not broken, cracked, damaged, or leaking with no loose or missing parts. It is belt driven. I'm going to check that the belt is not cut, frayed, excessively worn, and will move no more than 3/4 of an inch when I press on it. Also on this side, I have an alternator. I want to make sure it has no loose or missing parts. It is held securely in place, not broken, cracked, or damaged. The wires attached to it are securely connected also because a loose electrical connection can cause an electrical fire. I don't see any bare wires showing through the insulation, and the insulation is not dry rotted and flaking off. It also is belt driven. It uses the same belt as the water pump, which is not cracked, broken, frayed, and it moves no more than 3/4 of an inch when I press on it. Now we'll go to the other side and check the rest of the items on that side. On this side, I have an air compressor, securely mounted, not broken, cracked, or damaged, no loose or missing parts. All the hoses attached to it are securely connected, none of them are damaged or leaking. This does not have a belt. This is a gear-driven air compressor. Then my power steering pump, securely mounted, not broken, cracked, damaged, or leaking. It has no loose or missing parts. All the hoses attached to it also securely connected and not damaged or leaking. I'm going to check my oil. This is my oil dipstick. I would remove it, wipe it off with a cloth, put it all the way back in, pull it out and check that the oil is above the add mark. If the oil is below the add mark, I will add oil here and check it again until it's at the correct level. Once it's at the correct level, I'll make sure the dipstick and the filler tube cap both are securely back in place. This is my power steering reservoir. I want to make sure it has the proper amount of fluid in it. It's above the add mark. If I need to add fluid, I would add it here at the cap. I want to make sure the cap is securely back in place once I finish adding fluid. The reservoir itself is not broken, cracked, damaged. It's securely mounted. It's not leaking. There's no loose or missing bolts. And all the hoses attached to it also are securely connected and not damaged or leaking. I want to check my coolant reservoir and make sure it has the correct amount of coolant in it. It's above the minimum line. If I need to add coolant, I would add it at the cap here. Be sure not to remove the cap when the engine is hot. The engine must be cooled down to remove the cap. When you're finished, make sure the cap is securely back in place. The reservoir should be securely mounted, not broken, cracked, damaged, or leaking with no loose or missing parts. And the hoses attached to it securely connected, not damaged or leaking. The electrical wire is securely plugged in, and there's no bare wires showing through the insulation, and the insulation is not dry rotted and flaking off. Then I'm going to check my steering column. You can call it a steering shaft or steering rod, that it's not broken, cracked, or damaged. It moves no more than 10 degrees when you twist it with your hand, which is no more than 2 inches of movement on a 20-inch steering wheel. The universal joint here is not broken, cracked, or damaged. It has no loose or missing parts and no debris trapped inside it. It is also secured to the steering gearbox with a mounting bolt that is tight. The steering gearbox, securely mounted, not broken, cracked, or damaged, no loose or missing bolts, and it's not leaking. The hoses attached to it also securely connected, and they're not damaged or leaking. The pitman arm, not broken, cracked, or damaged, and it's securely mounted. On this end, it's securely mounted with a mounting bolt that's tight. The gears here are not worn or stripped. On the other end, it's mounted with a castle nut and cotter pin. Cotter pin is not missing, the bolt is tight. The bushing here is not missing, damaged, or leaking. The drag link is not broken, cracked, damaged, securely mounted, and it's connected on the other end with a castle nut and a cotter pin, and the bushing on this end is not damaged, leaking, or missing. Then the suspension, starting with the frame is not broken, cracked, or damaged, or bent. The spring mount in front, not broken, cracked, or damaged, and it's securely mounted to the frame with mounting bolts that are tight. Also, the spring mount at the rear is securely mounted, not broken, cracked, or damaged with no loose or missing bolts. The leaf spring themselves, no loose, missing, misaligned, cracked, or broken leaves. The torque spring on the bottom, not broken, cracked, or damaged, securely mounted to the spring mount in front, and securely mounted to the axle with 2 U-bolts that are not broken, cracked, or damaged, and the nuts on the bottom are not loose or missing. Also, I'm checking that the leaf spring is securely connected to the spring mount at the other end with no loose or missing bolts. The shock absorber has a bracket attached to the frame. The bracket is not broken, cracked, or damaged, no loose or missing parts. The shock is secured at top and bottom with mounting bolts that are tight. And the bushing at the bottom and the bushing at the top is not damaged, leaking, or missing. The shock itself is not bent, cracked, or leaking. Then on the brake system, I want to check the air hose going through the brake chamber. It's not cut, spliced, chafed, or worn. No indication it should leak. I don't hear air leaking out of it. It's securely attached to the brake chamber. The brake chamber is not rusted or bent, and it's not leaking. The clamp around the brake chamber is not loose, missing, or damaged. The bracket it's attached to is not broken, cracked, or damaged, and securely mounted. The 2 bolts holding it in place are not loose or missing. The push rod and slack adjuster are not broken, cracked, or damaged, and the parts that hold the 2 together, none are missing or damaged or loose. Then I'll pull on the push rod and make sure it moves no more than 1 inch. If it moves more than 1 inch, I need to have the brakes adjusted. Then I'm checking the foundation brakes to see that the brake liner has at least a 1/4 inch of pad on it. The brake liner is not broken, cracked, or damaged. The brake drum is not broken, cracked, or damaged. And there should be no dirt, oil, or grease inside the foundation brake area. The inside and outside of the rim is not bent or cracked. It should have no weld repairs, and it should have a metal valve stem with a valve cap that's not damaged or leaking. This is where we will check for proper inflation of the tire with the tire pressure gauge. The tires also need to be at least 4/32 deep in tread. The tire should be evenly worn. The inside and outside sidewall should have no abrasions, bumps, or cuts. No lug nuts should be missing. None should be loose. No rust trail or shining thread to indicate a loose or stripped lug nut. The hub oil seal should not be leaking. None of the bolts should be loose or missing. You should have the correct amount of hub oil in it. You should be able to see through the gauge here on the side. If you can't, you can remove the rubber cap. Check inside that you have the correct amount of hub oil. Make sure also that the cap is not dry rotted and hard so that it won't leak when you put it back in place. That completes Form A.